Here is our review of Death Stranding 2. In this review, we're going to talk a lot about Death Stranding 2, and I'm going to try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. So to start off, I want to talk about the kind of beginning of the game and talk a little bit about kind of where the setting is. So it takes place a couple years after the first game. Sam Porter is now in Mexico. He has been found by Fragile, who has been looking for him while he has been taking care of Lou, which was the pod baby from the first game. They have now trooped over to Mexico. They have left the UCA. They are done doing their work for that crew. And now they have been asked again to do similar work, but in Mexico for Fragile's new crew called Drawbridge. It's a really cool story that starts off really, really tight to begin with. It gives you that understanding of, again, what happened in the previous game, you know, what was the Death Stranding and why, and how do we kind of fight that? How do we fight all of the BTs that have been in the world? And also, how do we kind of, you know, pull some humanity back into the world in a strong way? This game is fantastic in its visual presentation. I think everyone who played the first game automatically knows the pedigree that Kojima Productions has. I think everyone has an idea of what Kojima can do as not only as an auteur, but as a writer and as a person who is thinking very deeply about a lot of the things that we've seen throughout his career. You know, he's talked about a lot of different ideas and a lot of different themes that go across the world. And even in this first game that hit right before COVID, it was even more kind of, telling how it hit because we were all separated from each other. And the idea was connection, right? You know, how do we get together? How do we form alliances? How do we stay contained as a society? The theme for the second game was, should we have connected? And to a certain extent, I think that answer never really comes through. I think this game is a lot of different things. It is trying to do a lot in a lot of different spaces. And I think outside of the visual presentation, which I think is top notch, I think Decima Engine continues to showcase why it is one of the most beautiful and kind of breathtaking spaces and engines we've ever seen. But this game falls apart really quickly narratively. This is probably one of my most disappointed games that I've gotten a chance to play in a long time, and especially was kind of sad because Kojima usually comes through with major bangers all over the place. I think, you know, as a big fan of his work and as a big fan of him, I always have an expectation that there's going to be a deeper level to the narrative pieces that come along with this game. And I finished this game after 65 hours, and it was a really melancholy kind of game, which I think this game already has been. Like the series has been a very melancholy one. But in the first game, it felt like you got a chance to not only understand the motivations for the characters that were there, you know, you had some kind of rapport with the folks that were there in those spaces with certain characters popping up and all of them being introduced in the first place. But underneath it, there was a foundation of world building and theory crafting that really kind of held everything together. Even if you didn't like the game and you like the kind of moment to moment, you know, carrying things on your back, UPS style gameplay, it was something where the themes were the things that were kind of pulling it all together. And in Death Stranding 2, there are so many disparate things that Kojima is trying to do with the writing that it never feels like it comes together until the very, very end. And I finished this game in 65 hours, playing a ton of different stuff within it, you know, that really left me kind of wanting something different out of this game. And I wound up being super disappointed in this game, which was something I was looking forward to for most of the time that this thing has gotten announced. And I sat there and I kind of had a moment where I took a breath and I said, "Did you enjoy this game?" And I said, "I enjoyed looking at it, and I enjoyed the trek that you wind up having." That was the similar parts to the first game, that feeling of loneliness and that feeling of, you know, completing a task and that feeling of, you know, reward that you get for doing a thing and not breaking your stuff and those pieces in there. But all the other pieces of this game that really are speaking to narrative kind of fall flat on their face often. And that part is really weird. It's a thing where I call it Spike Lee syndrome to a certain extent. You know, there's a moment where Spike Lee in his, you know, career was always in his own movies. And after a while, you got kind of tired of seeing him in his own stuff, and you wanted the other people to shine and have a moment to be able to do that work for themselves. And I feel like with this game, it feels like Kojima is in that space again. He doesn't show up in the game, but the narrative pieces and the metaphors that he is trying to connect just don't go anywhere. And that part is just, unappealing as a player because you're spending a ton of time in this world. And you also are looking to really kind of literally connect with some of these characters. And none of these characters really afford enough of, I wouldn't say a performance, but I would say like they aren't written in a way where you're given the space to care about them. You're jumping around from scene to scene often enough in between gameplay pieces where the explainers that are kind of helping you along to understand how all of these pieces are touching, they never really get there in a way that feels satisfying, in a way that feels complementary to the characters and the actors. And it also feels like, I don't want to use the phrase high in your own supply, but it feels like that. It feels like, if you're trying to tell a very obtuse story, you need to be able to have a payoff in a way that gives the player that aha moment where they feel smart. And it never really came through in this game. And that part was just super disappointing. I go into this game with the biggest kudos for the art team. Again, the environmental teams on this game are just brilliant. They are just knocking it out of the park. Like, there are some moments when this game opens up that you first see and you're like, man, this is what the future, this is what the future of games can continue to be like. And you want this to be a storytelling medium that feels good. And you want this to be a storytelling medium that feels complete. And it never does. It never really gets to a point where you're like, oh, that was really smart, or really, that's really interesting. But all that to say, I love what Kojima gets a chance to do. I think Kojima has been written a blank check in a really cool way where he can basically do whatever he wants without anyone kind of reining him in narratively or kind of in those spaces. And you wind up getting some cool moments, right? Like, I think there are some really special, dope fight scenes. There are some really impactful moments in terms of story bits and the way that they kind of layer a lot of the gameplay elements that come up in the game. Again, the ability to go and deliver these packages and see their ranks go up, and then you wind up getting new cool things is a cool part of the game. I think that part has worked well in the first game and continues to work well here. But the thing that is the connective tissue in this game is the story. And if the story doesn't feel good, then all of the rest of it kind of doesn't matter in a lot of different ways. I do think there was a standout performance by Troy Baker. I think Troy Baker again showcases how good he is as an actor. I love his moments as Higgs in the game. He makes his return in that space. Tommy Earl Jenkins also has a quick moment that you get a chance to see him and you get to see his face in the game early. But like, those things are so small and few and far between across all of the kind of narrative and story, that it just leaves you wanting not only for, not even, I'm going to say an explainer, because it's not even an explainer, because I think even if you were to ask other people when they play this, like, I'm going to be curious to see if they actually got it, right? Like, the theory and the theme from the first game was connection, loss. It was this ability to kind of understand that we all are a part of this one big human race. And this one delves into a ton of different things that I don't want to talk about because it would go into spoilers. But each one of those moments feels so separated and so, again, I use the word obtuse, but it feels like trying to be deep for the sake of being deep. And that sometimes just doesn't play well. It just doesn't do what you hope it does for the player. It doesn't do it for the story and for the game itself. And it just winds up being like, man, I don't want to say I felt like I wasted a bunch of time playing this, because I didn't. I felt like I got some really cool moments and saw some stuff in here that was like, ooh, if you build on that, that would be cool if you built on that. And then none of those things get built off of. Or at least it didn't feel like that way, from a story perspective, for me. So this game is beautiful. I think this game continues to be the showcase and the showpiece for the PlayStation brand. I think, everyone who is going to play this game is going to be wowed by everything that you get a chance to see. The woman who plays Fragile, I also want to give her kudos because she was brilliant and fantastic in the scenes that she was in. But yeah, this game is a weird anomaly. I think, people who, this is going to be one of those, like, you either really loved it or you really hated it kind of games. And that was the first game too. But this one is even more so, where I feel like fans of the series, myself included, will probably come away from this and be like, what was that? I don't know what that was supposed to be. Was this supposed to be this idea around, reconnection? Is it supposed to be something again about loss? Is it supposed to be something else about, just like, the expansion of the world and other things like that? Like, some of those themes are in there. But if you were to sit me down and say, like, hey, Kyle, what was this game about? I probably couldn't tell you. And that sucks. That's a weird thing to say after spending 65 hours with the game. And feeling like, outside of the major big cutscenes that were really cool, and some of the new monsters and some of the new enemies and some of those things, it was a big miss for me in a huge way. Like, if I were to score this game, probably get a 3 out of 5, which I would not say is a thing that I would have said for a Kojima joint in a long time. What this makes me want, though, in the grand scheme, is I would love to see Kojima take some time off. I would love to see him take a moment, or if not take some time off, you have this really dope production studio. Everyone at the studio is brilliant at what they do. Maybe this is a time to give the baton to somebody else for a game. We've seen that in other studios, over the years, where multiple leads have taken over a franchise. Maybe it's time for someone else to kind of, play around with the Death Stranding recipe and do something different. Because it just felt like Kojima was, vibing out and had an idea in his head, but it just never really came to a point, and it never really came together. It never really gelled in the ways that you would hoped. And that was, disappointing, not only from a fan perspective, but like, I wonder how this is going to land with people in a much broader way. I think this is the one of the games of the year that I think a lot of Sony fans were hoping for, as the kind of like, we got another banger in the holster. And at least for me, this was more of a miss than it was a hit. And that's something I did not think I would say for a game like Death Stranding. I do want everybody to play it, though. I think it's worth your time. I think it's worth your money. I think it's worth experiencing it. I think it's worth taking time to really sit down with it and try to pull the threads that you can from it and see if any of it actually relates and feels kind of, like it's for you. Like, you can find the nuggets of good in it. And again, I think there are some nuggets of good in this thing. I think it runs beautifully on PlayStation 5 Pro. Played it on there, took a bunch of screenshots and took a bunch of videos, because I think it's just like a showpiece again. But I'm hoping that we see something different come out of Kojima in a while, because you can see the brilliance in it. You can see the goodies in it. I hope that we get back to that. So I want you all to have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Again, it's always kind of hard to do reviews like this where you cannot talk a lot about the story. Again, it's a lot of, mixed emotions in this game, and a lot of mixed messages as well. But we'll probably be talking about this again more on the show. I would love to talk to other people and hear their experiences and have that kind of communal come to discussion moment, because so expect some stuff there as well that we'll see potentially down the line, because I would love to chop it up with people and figure out what they thought about the game. But definitely, thank you so much for checking out the video. Thank you so much for checking out the review, and I hope you all check out the channel. Go subscribe, go like it, go hit the notifications, and we have more dopeness here at Spawn and Me much later. So much love to you all. Have a good night. Peace.